Who dares to have a prince to congratulate their daughter in this world? The documents of the General of Dongtian Shu are almost as good as they are. Everyone lamented. The crown prince was forced to rejoice. Is this a moral decline or a decline in imperial power? Wenmian Mian, with a pitiful reminder of the social animal, opened her eyes but became the daughter of a great general. She even found a handsome and wealthy Prince of Annam as her fiancé, thinking that she would live a small life of endless wealth and blessings from then on. Unexpectedly, the people in the mansion are not good at financial management and have reached the point of becoming sellers to make ends meet. The handsome and kind-hearted prince looked affectionate and said, "The gold and silver in this prince's mansion are full of warehouses, and the queen spends them casually." When Mian's eyes lit up and he said, "Someone, come and pack silver tickets. From now on, prince, the princess spends money like flowing water, and today it's 100,000 taels. It doesn't matter, my king has a strong foundation, and the queen is willing to spend money. Prince, the princess is spending money recklessly. Your treasury is almost at its bottom. No problem, I can still earn it. Prince, the queen cleared your treasury overnight." What? His Royal Highness Annam, who is wealthy and formidable, is about to crack apart. When Mian walked slowly and said, "Prince, don't worry, I'll give you a street that can lay golden eggs." Social Animal Queen vs Prince Chongshi, Wenmian Mian. Spending money for a while is satisfying, spending money for a long time is always satisfying. Keywords of the novel. Report to the prince, the princess is once again poor and crazy without a pop-up window. Report to the prince, the princess is once again poor and crazy. Download the complete text. Report to the prince, the princess is once again poor and crazy. Read the latest chapter. Chapter 1. Making the Crown Prince Happy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Making the Prince Happy. Your Majesty, I beg you this time. I have raised such a daughter in my entire life, and I can't just watch her go. You can give me a prince. In the majestic study, General Wen Sheng, who held nearly 40% of the world's military power, reluctantly shed his authority and cried uncontrollably. My daughter is only 13 years old. If she just goes like this, I'm afraid she won't be able to survive. The emperor, who was over 40 years old, had a splitting headache and a face full of anger, wishing to kick this person out with a single kick. Your daughter has not yet reached her hairpin, and my son has become a father. There is no second person in the world to congratulate your daughter. Also, what does it mean to have a daughter and not have your son? This is truly the first time that a prince has gone to congratulate a courtier's daughter. How much did it take to come up with this idea after not wanting to live? If it weren't for the extraordinary achievements you have made for my Dong Shu, I would have had to cut off your neck today. I'm really angry with him. Despite all the paperwork, his daughter is almost gone, and he still cares about what his neck does. I can chop off the neck of the last general for you. Can I give it to a prince before cutting it off? The emperor's temples were jumping and jumping, and he picked up the memorial in his hand and threw it over. The document was barely dodged, and the emperor became even more angry. The atmosphere in the study was tense, and the palace attendants wished to be blind and deaf on the spot, fearing that the emperor would implicate them. At this moment, the dignified queen walked into the study and bowed to the emperor before turning around and saying, "General Wen, are you determined to be the eldest prince?" The document reluctantly lifted its head, as if seeing a savior. "Madam, the daughter of the last general is sick and suddenly falls asleep. The abbot of Yuanan Temple said that there should be imperial protection, and it is best for a man born in Tianhua Sanctuary to be connected to his fate or possibly saved. Only the prince has imperial protection in the world." It is not a secret that Wenmian Mian, the daughter of Wenmian Mian, suddenly fell asleep and couldn't wake up. The imperial physician of Tai Hospital also treated her several times, but couldn't find the cause at all. The empress turned to the emperor and said, "Your Majesty, General Wen has been fighting in all directions for years in exchange for the current peace. There is only one son and one daughter in the mansion. If there is really an accident, General Wen should be so sad. It's better to fulfill General Wen. The emperor was slightly angry, and he had high hopes for several princes. According to the documents and the military power in his hands, if the child of the Wen family were lively, he would naturally be willing. But that's ecstasy. How could he agree that the royal face still needs it? The empress reminded, the sixth prince was also born in Tianyushi. He is 17 years old and has not yet been engaged. He is less than 5 years old from Miss Wen, which is a perfect match. The emperor suddenly raised his head. Yes, he also had a sixth prince. Although his fate was not good, he was also a prince. Document Mian, what do you think of my sixth prince? Whether it is a trusted general of the court or not, the emperor must also have a choice in critical times. The sixth prince. Of course, Wenmian knew that the sixth prince's mansion was separated by a wall from his general's mansion. It was a constant stream of wealth, and he was always jealous. But that sixth prince was a tough person approved by the imperial censorate, who punished his 6 relatives. His birth mother, Lady Rugia, had already left early, and the emperor would feel heartbroken every time he saw him. And he was also unlucky, so unlucky that he even choked his teeth when drinking cold water. I heard that he was hit several times by tiles falling from the eaves while walking on the road. Is it still okay for my own daughter to fall into the hands of someone like this when she can't see it anymore? The empress guessed his thoughts and persuaded him, General Wen, the sixth prince is of noble character and excellent appearance. As he doesn't like government affairs, the emperor has left it to him to make things his own way, and now he has achieved some success. Although he did not walk in the court, he was still a prince valued by the emperor. The documents were hesitant. In comparison, although they were all princes, how could the sixth prince compare to the grand prince? Your Majesty, I will think that, you think it's bullshit. Seeing that he dared to be picky, the emperor became even more angry and immediately interrupted his words. The sixth prince is the prince I admire. Apart from anything else, just because he can earn money, your father and son can't even catch up with him. You, who can spend 3 cents even if you have a penny, are you sorry to dislike him? Last winter, you were trapped in Wukishan. If it weren't for the sixth prince's effective mobilization of food and silver, grass would have grown on your grave. The emperor was angry, and the servants in the study knelt down on the ground, while the empress wisely shut her mouth. Only the document tightly pursed his lips, his heart at war with heaven and man, thinking that his daughter was already in danger, and that the eldest prince would not be able to find her. He also looked down on the other princes and could only reluctantly let the sixth prince make up for it. After all, what the master said should be said sooner rather than later. The emperor has said so, then let's take the sixth prince. In that tone, the emperor really deserved to be beaten. He grabbed the teacup and threw it over. I beg you, don't think I dare not chop you. The fact proves that the emperor really dared not chop off the document. On that day, a decree shocked the entire court. The emperor conferred the title of Prince of Annam on the sixth prince, Jingyun, and paired him with the girl from General Wen Xing's mansion who was not sure if she would perish. This all the civil and military officials in the Manchu dynasty shook their heads, unable to speak, dare not speak. But things are just so magical. The ceremonial official who announced the decree had just finished reading the decree at General Wen Xing's mansion, and Wenmian, who had been unconscious for half a month, woke up 2 days later. Wenmian, who opened his eyes, stared blankly at the mosquito net above his head, savoring the bitter taste of medicine in his mouth and sighing softly. She has traveled. No, it was Black and White Wu Chang who caught the wrong person. The little girl was still physically strong, so Soa was taken to have an abortion and then caught to fill the hole. The place where the pit was filled was Kyoto, the capital of the Eastern Shu dynasty. She is now 13 years old and the daughter of a particularly powerful general. As for the little girl's memory, she inherited half of it, incomplete. Her general's father is now busy thanking the gods. After all, in everyone's eyes, she was awakened by excitement. As soon as she thought about this cheap father bringing her a prince to celebrate, she felt both proud and worried, afraid that the wealth and status in front of her would disappear too quickly, and she would not have enjoyed it before. "Miss, it's time to take some medicine." The girl Lingua came with a dark medicinal juice, which startled her. "That medicine is really too bitter." "Lingua, hello to me." She swallowed the unspoken words, lowered her head and rubbed her eyes, raised them again, lowered her head and rubbed them again, and then looked again. After several repetitions, she was completely stunned, and Lingua took this opportunity to feed the medicine into her mouth without even noticing it. Waiting for Lingua to leave, she rubbed her face fiercely, frightening her to death. She saw a red light flashing on Lingua's head. Before she could recover, another girl came into the room. She instinctively looked over and saw a dark cloud entwined around her head, which scared her to close her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, the girl had already cleaned up the juice that had just spilled and respectfully retreated. As she pondered incessantly in her mind, a scream accompanied by a crackling sound sounded, which frightened her and made her quickly get up to take a look. Lingua came in anxiously to report, "Miss, the grape trellis in the yard just collapsed. Spring apricot happened to pass by and was hit in the leg by the wooden trellis. It's really unlucky. Wenmian Mian. So, besides being caught to fill the hole, she also had a pair of lucky eyes attached to her." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. A Pair of Magical Eyes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. A Pair of Magical Eyes. "Girl, it's time to take some medicine." When Lingua came again carrying the dark medicinal juice, Wenmian Mian suddenly felt tense all over. She was now afraid of this girl and shouted 3 times a day. "Girl, it's time to take the medicine. Every time I shout, I think of De Lang, with a feeling that I can't wake up after drinking." Looking at the red light still shining on Lingua's head, she was almost certain that her eyes could sense luck. As for whether there were any other uses, it was not yet known. Is this compensation for bringing her to fill the hole? Seeing her pretending to sleep and avoid taking medicine again, Lingua put down the medicine bowl and approached with a smile, persuading, "Miss, if you want to sleep again, the doctor in the mansion will think you're not doing well and will continue taking medicine." Wenmian Mian opened her eyelids and rolled her eyes silently. "Even the local doctors don't know what kind of illness I have. They even need to prescribe a prescription for what to do, so I won't drink it." As he spoke, a greeting sounded outside the door, and in the blink of an eye, a well-proportioned and slender young man with a handsome and sunny face walked in. "Sister, do you want to cheat and not take medicine again?" Lai is Wenmian Mian's elder brother, Wen Lingxiao. Wen Lingxiao is 17 this year. He is handsome and sunny, with a B waist and ape back, and a crane-like appearance that can captivate a little girl at a glance. At a young age, he followed his father to fight in all directions, and now has military achievements. He is a 5th-grade powerful general. A handsome man is pleasing to the eye. Even if this person is his own brother with a faint cloud above his head, it doesn't delay Wenmian Mian from looking at him happily. "Brother, do you think I'm doing so well now? Don't take any medicine, okay?" Wen Lingxiao shook his head helplessly when he saw that she was really being naughty. "Brother, I bought you jade candy. After drinking the medicine, you can have a sweet mouth. This is the last bowl of medicine, you have to be good." Before Wenmian could continue to struggle, the medicine bowl had already been delivered to her mouth, and then her chin was pinched, and the medicine juice flowed down her throat. Cough. Cough. Wenmian Mian's eyes were filled with tears. Just as she was about to speak, a refreshing and sweet candy came into her mouth and casually wiped away her tears. "Brother, you really have grown such a face in vain," she said. "What a good-looking person, behaving so rudely, you won't be able to find your sister. Law in the future. Not at all gentle. When Ling Xiao raised his sword eyebrows lightly, feeling that his movements were already very gentle just now, and he didn't even make any red marks on his sister's chin. However, his younger sister has already condemned him, and he needs to be more lenient in the future. Thinking that his younger sister is about to get married, he whispered. Prince Annam left last month and has not yet returned. The Ministry of Rites is already preparing for his appointment and other related matters. The etiquette of waiting for him to return is about to begin. Wenmian Mian sat cross-legged on the bed and asked helplessly, am I really going to marry the sixth prince? Oh my goodness, she's only 13 years old now. When Ling Xiao felt a bit distressed. The father and son had already discussed this matter and could not repent. Firstly, the imperial power did not allow them to provoke. What if my younger sister becomes inexplicably unconscious after regretting her marriage? They can't afford to gamble. The sixth prince is now the Prince of Annam, living next door to us. I have the opportunity to discuss with him and see if we can break through the walls of the two courtyards. You just need to move to a different room, don't worry. After all the words were said, Wenmian Mian could only nod. Anyway, she is still young and only needs to move into a different room. Seeing her gaze constantly glancing at her head, when Ling Xiao curiously asked, what's on my head, brother? Wenmian thought for a moment and realized that her current eyes were too surreal. It's better not to say it for now, and she hasn't figured it out yet. I'm not looking at your head, I'm looking outside and want to go out for a walk. As she spoke, she got out of bed and had been waking up for a few days before leaving this door. Okay, brother will accompany you around. After tidying up for a while, the two siblings left the Jingyun residence, which was a leisurely courtyard, and began to stroll around the mansion. At this time, it is May with the fragrance of locust flowers, and the mansion is filled with scenery, colorful and vibrant. From time to time, there were servants hurriedly passing by in the garden. Seeing that she was already able to go out for a walk, many people would curiously glance at her and marvel at the miraculous act of ecstasy. Liao Zhicheng, the second steward of the mansion, happily welcomed his brother and sister to greet him. Seeing a faint red light on his head, Wenmian Mian smiled and asked, is there a happy occasion for Steward Liao? Liao Zhicheng smiled and said, as for Miss Lu, the steward, is old. Yesterday, he officially proposed to retire and take care of himself. At the same time, he recommended a servant to become the new steward. The general has already nodded on this matter. Congratulations to Manager Liao. This can be considered a promotion, naturally it's a joyful event. After strolling for a while, I saw a person with a dark cloud passing by from a distance under the corridor. The cloud was thick and black like ink, and the person looked exhausted. When Ling Xiao saw that she had been staring at a servant all along. Curious about asking, she covered her mouth with her small hand and followed her gaze, only to see the servant fall straight into the lotus pond. Does my sister know he's going to fall? Wenmian shook his head like a tambourine, feeling only a slight swelling and pain in his eyes, which was very uncomfortable. At this moment, when Ling Xiao's servant rushed over with a hesitant expression. Seeing that when Ling Xiao had sent her back to the Jingyun residence, he turned around and walked away with a gust of wind. Outside the Jingyun residence, servant Wang Hai anxiously stepped forward and said, young master, we have a buyer for that 9-story ghost work ball. Duke Qingguo will celebrate his 60th birthday next month, and the Minister of Personnel wants to buy it as a gift. When Ling Xiao lowered his voice and said, how about the bid? Wang Hai extended a finger and said, 1,000 taels. When Ling Xiao frowned, knowing that he was short of money in deliberately lowering the price. Wang Hai sighed helplessly as the mansion became increasingly difficult. The girl wanted to marry Prince Annam, but now she couldn't even get a decent dowry, so it was time to secretly sell off the treasures in the mansion. Young master, that ghost ball is the first one in Kyoto. Earlier, the young master of the Fugua mansion sold 3,000 taels but we didn't sell them. Isn't selling these 1,000 taels offending people? Wen Lingxiao also knew this truth and could only say, if you release the news, just say it's not for sale below 5,000 taels, no, 4,000 taels. Also, release the news that I'm going to take action on the cold moon. Hanyue is a long sword, which is his favorite sword. He has nothing to give up for his sister. Wang Hai left with a sore face and a dejected expression. Wen Lingxiao also turned around and headed towards the main courtyard. At this moment, Kaiyun was inside, and Wenmian Mian was silently shedding tears. Her eyes were too uncomfortable. She guessed that it was because she had been watching someone else's luck all day, so tears flowed uncontrollably, indicating that this skill had a negative effect. When she thought about using it several times in a row in the future, she would shed tears regardless of the situation, and a reputation for crying bags would definitely not run away. This skill is really useless. Recommended authors Crispy ADC Works Quickware. The host becomes an innocent white lotus again. Introduction. 1 second ago, Hui Ling was still framing, and the next second it turned into a humiliating white lotus flower. The previous second, Hui Ling was still beating up the villain, and the next second, she became the light of saving the villain. The breath of slapping the face is ever changing, but only by treating the person with their own way can they be cured. Again. A dog bites a dog, a mouthful of fur. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. People at the head of good fortune. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. People at the head of good fortune. The second prince's mansion was as lively as ever, with the singer playing soft music. The second prince Hua Jingsheng held his wine cup and lightly curled his lips. Did you inquire clearly? The strategist, who stood in front of him, smiled and said, there is more than one family that knows about Wen Lingxiao's intention to take out the ghost ball. The Minister of Personnel, Zhou Bin, wants to offer 1,000 taels of silver, but Wen Lingxiao did not agree. Humph. Jing Xing snorted coldly and said, my good brother is still so stingy when it comes to handling things. Zhou Bin is really useless. The strategist bowed and the smile at the corner of his mouth grew even stronger. That 9-layer ghost work ball is a sacred item of the kingdom of Lei Luo. After the kingdom of Lei Luo was defeated, it was handed over to the emperor. In recognition of General Wen's bravery, this ghost work ball was rewarded to General Wen. This is a well-known fact in both civil and military affairs of the court. It would be a great crime for the emperor to privately buy and sell imperial gifts by the Xiaowen mansion. Second prince, I thought I could buy it, but General Wen, who was lured or threatened with this ghostly work ball, has an effect. The second prince picked up his wine cup and drank it all in one gulp. With a glance, he saw that the counselor was still holding on and said, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and take care of it. The strategist bowed again and respectfully retreated. On this day, the sky is clear and the breeze is gentle. Wen Lingxiao and Wenmian Mian's siblings arrived at a tea house in the city and sat down after asking for an elegant seat on the second floor. Downstairs were bustling with cars and people, and the cries of the peddler and the laughter of the children overlapped, making Wenmian Mian feel very fresh. The waiter from the tea house enthusiastically brought the refreshments and said, young master, miss, your 2 refreshments. Wenmian Mian smiled and rewarded him with a small silver nudity, and the happy guy thanked him repeatedly. Waiting for the waiter to step back, Wenmian Mian picked up the tea and took a shallow peck, saying with a smile, brother, I feel like this waiter is going to have bad luck just now. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard a sound coming from the stairwell, followed by a howl. Wen Lingxiao looked at Wenmian Mian in surprise and quickly got up to take a closer look. The guy fell down the stairs, it looks like he fell quite badly. Wen Lingxiao blinked, her sister's mouth is like a crow's. Did you just talk nonsense? Wenmian Mian gave a meaningful smile and said, this is my intuition, isn't it powerful? Wen Lingxiao smiled and found that his sister had become even more mischievous after waking up. Wenmian's gaze occasionally turned to the people on the street, hoping to catch a lucky person. For several days in a row, she was pondering over her own eyes, and slowly she came up with a name. As long as she is willing, the servant's luck can be judged casually, and only by looking at them 10 or so times in a row will she feel uncomfortable. But someone like her father, who has an extraordinary status, seems to be struggling, and after seeing it, the side effects are particularly severe. In addition to tears and headaches, it can also cause skills to malfunction for the next period of time. After continuous experimentation, she can now control her eyes, and as long as she is willing, there is no difference from ordinary eyes. However, she also discovered an interesting thing that human luck can infect or counteract each other, which made her very energetic. If she finds someone with good luck in the future, she can rely on it and get some good luck. However, the top priority now is to find someone with good luck to dispel the dark clouds above her brother's head. For some unknown reason, the dark clouds above her brother's head have become much stronger. Unfortunately, such a person cannot appear at any time. Her eyes are sour when she looks, and when tears are about to fall, she doesn't see anything. Just as she was about to shift her position, she suddenly came to her senses and said, "Who is that person?" She pointed to a young man in black clothes, who came out of a cosmetics shop with a folding fan in his hand. A bright red light shone on his head, indicating a sign of good luck. Wen Chongling, the crown prince of Jingyun, is the leader among the younger generation. Wen Chongling, when Ling Xiao recognized with just one glance Su Sherwen's gaze was too eager, and the young man in black clothes looked up, then smiled. The direction of his feet changed and he came towards the direction of the tea house. At this moment, Wenmian Mian noticed that the dark clouds on her brother's head were becoming more and more intense, as if ink had spilled into clean water. This discovery made her a bit anxious, and at this point, the next step should be an accident. "Brother, do you know him?" When Ling Xiao picked up his teacup and took a sip. "You know him too, Wen Chongling, the eldest son of the Jingyun mansion." Wenmian Mian gave a dry smile and casually found an excuse to get by. "I picked up a piece of bean paste cake and took a bite. I soon found a matching person in my mind. I heard that this person is a man of great intelligence and bold personality, and he is one of the people who are often talked about by the elders in Kyoto. Like his brother, he is known as the Kyoto Shuangling. An excellent youth." Just as Wen Chongling was about to arrive, as soon as she walked into Wenmian Mian, she found that the red light on his head was really dazzling, completely different from her brother's appearance of being unlucky at first glance. "Brother Ling Xiao, even if you come back, we won't gather with everyone. We're all waiting for you to have a drink together." As soon as Wen Chongling arrived, he sat down familiar and spoke to Wen Ling Xiao, but his eyes were fixed on Wenmian Mian. At this time, Wenmian Mian still had some baby's fat on his body, with a bun on his head, eating bean paste cake, and his cheeks stirred like a rabbit. A pair of big, clear and bright eyes looked curiously at Wen Chongling, then turned to look at her brother. Just as Wen Chongling was sitting down, the dark cloud on his brother's head moved and then seemed to loosen. She is very excited about this discovery. Before she could speak, Wen Chongling smiled and said, "Miss Wen has become much cuter after not seeing her for many days." Wenmian Mian nodded again and again. She was very cute now. She swallowed the bean paste cake in her mouth and said with a smile, "You are so discerning, Shitzi Chongling. You are more handsome than before." With the words of Sister Wen, I will inevitably set up a table at Yaku Tower tomorrow and invite Sister Wen and Brother Xiao to gather together. Wen Chongling had seen Wenmian Mian before. At that time, she was still an arrogant girl with eyes above her head. She never expected to see her again, but her temperament changed again. "It's much more pleasing than before." Seeing that he had changed his tone and called her Wen Mimi, Wen Ling Xiao's lips twitched slightly, thinking to himself that this person is shameless and who cares about his food. Wenmian Mian put down the bean paste cake and said with a smile, "I remember elder brother Chongling's words. If I don't eat this meal in the end, I will ask in person. After a while, the dark cloud above Wen Lingxiao's head showed signs of loosening, and the black smoke drifted away in strands. Wenmian Mian smiled even more happily. We need to sit with Wen Chongling, who is lucky, for a while longer, maybe we can still touch his good luck in the end. Wen Chongling patted her chest and promised, Sister Wen, rest assured. I will personally come to the door to invite you when Yunxian comes back. Wenmian Mian blinked her big eyes and said, Who is Yunxian? Wen Chongling was overjoyed and immediately explained to her, Prince Annam, surnamed Hua, named Jingyun, with the courtesy name Yunxian, you will see it soon. Recommend the little sisters Yan Shui's new book I Have a Herbal Garden. The introduction is as follows. A Chinese medicine college student's 100-grass poem, unexpectedly dressed up as the eponymous little widow with a hard life in the book, it is also bound to an unorthodox, by Kwin system. You're responsible for being as beautiful as a flower, and I'm responsible for planting grass to support the family, said the handsome couple who remarried. Bai Chao Shi opened a pharmacy, made tonic diet, and launched cosmetics, establish a Bai Chao conservation base, establish a herbal academy and trading center, and become famous for its divine medicine brand in Dian. Shu, who had a natural talent since childhood, was tragically framed by treacherous people and became a frail young man wandering around. I originally came from the Shura Sea in hell, what qualifications do I have to give you happiness? However, with her favor, the young man who had seen the ups and downs of the world was unwilling to let go anymore. 100 herbs in the world are inferior to you, you are my only medicinal stone. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Hua Jingyun returns. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Hua Jingyun returns. Hua Jingyun, with the courtesy name Yunxian. Wenmian Mian silently recited it twice, then his eyebrows and eyes curved with a smile, and his curled eyelashes fanned up like a fan. By the name, I feel like this person looks good. Wen Chongling put the folding fan in his hand aside, pushed aside the teacup in front of him, and leaned forward eagerly, saying, Sister Wen, you have the truth. When it comes to appearance, in this city of Kyoto, Yunxian dares to be the second and no one dares to be the first. You can be considered as having a graceful figure, a face as beautiful as jade, and a handsome and graceful demeanor. Wenmian Mian also leaned forward a bit and asked happily, Really? I really want to go and see what you said. The old and young are not deceived, and there is no exaggeration at all. Without realizing Wenmian Mian's expected shyness, Wen Chongling became happy and said, Yunxian went out of Beijing a while ago and will be back soon. Mian Mian's sister will know when she sees her, and what I said will not be taken seriously. Brother Chongling, you've said that, so I must meet you first. Speaking of which, the 6 Emperor's mansion and the General's mansion are separated by a wall. Wenmian Mian was stunned and did not search for his shadow in his memory. His brother also looked unfamiliar. This social interaction is not good. Watching his younger sister and Wen Chongling quickly call each other brothers and sisters, Wen Lingxiao's face stretched so long. Wen Chongling was in high spirits, and he decided to talk to Yunxian more often in the future. Marrying a lovely little princess seems like a good idea, anyway, Yunxian usually looks like a stranger and never enters. His quiet mansion should also be lively now. As the clouds over her brother's head gradually dissipated, Wenmian smiled and picked up a bean paste cake. Sure enough, all the haze can be dispelled by sunlight, and bad luck is no exception. Sister, you have just eaten 2 bean paste cake. Wen Lingxiao reached out to take off the bean paste cake she held in her hand. She had eaten so much before going out. If she ate it again, it would not be safe. Wenmian Mian blinked his eyes as he looked over his head and obediently patted his hands. My stomach is a bit full, let's go shopping, she said, turning his gaze to Wen Chongling's head. He became envious again, dispelling the dark clouds on her brother's head. Not only was his good fortune unaffected, but it seemed even stronger. Wen Lingxiao stood up and casually bowed to Wen Chongling, Prince Wen, let's take a step first. When Chongling added tea to himself with a teapot and said meaningfully, Brother Ling Xiao, the 9-layer ghost craft ball is a good item, but it needs to be properly kept. When Ling Xiao's face slightly froze, and after a while, he arched his hand and said, "Thank you, Brother Chongling, for your guidance." When Chongling picked up a teacup and gestured, "Ling Xiao, you're welcome. The scenery here is nice, I'll sit down again." Waiting to enter the crowd downstairs, when Wenmian Mian curiously asked, "Brother, what's wrong with the 9th floor ghost ball?" When Ling Xiao shook his head and quickly changed the topic, "It's nothing, it's rare to see anything you want to eat." "Brother, I'll buy it for you." When Chongling put down his teacup in the teahouse and chuckled lightly. Today, it can be considered that he is doing a good deed every day for the sake of Yun Xian's face. He even dares to steal and sell things bestowed by the emperor. What is the financial situation of General Wen's mansion? His gaze swept slightly, and as he watched Wenmian's bouncing back, his smile deepened by 2 points. He was certain that the girl must not know how many people were busy waking up because of her safety. However, he really wants to know what kind of expression Yun Xian looked like when he found out he was sent out to celebrate. The emperor has 9 sons, most of whom are already adults. The document holds over 30% of the military power of Dongshu, and it can be said that whoever can win him over is like a tiger adding wings. The 6th Prince Jingyun carried the reputation of his father's hard work, dealing with lowly merchants all day and never walking in court. In recent years, no one has been on guard against him. When he found out that he was about to marry the unmarried girl in the mansion of General Wen, no one took her seriously. After all, it was very likely that the girl would not be able to live. The so-called ecstasy is just self-deception under helplessness. Wenmian Mian woke up. According to General Wen's father and son's love for Wenmian Mian, who knows what will happen in the future. At this moment, the 2 sides of the dense forest outside the suburbs of Beijing were experiencing a battle, and the man in black frowned as he looked at the corpses lying haphazardly in front of him. He stood under the shade of the tree, half of his body covered by the leaves, which made his outline very straight and distinct. The light shining through the shade also highlighted his increasingly upright figure. The long sword in hand emitted a deep cold light, and a drop of blood dripped from the tip of the knife. "Did you find out what?" The subordinates shook their heads and felt very strange. They had already encountered 3 ambushes on their way back to the capital, which had never happened before. Waiting for the group to guard their way out of the woods, they encountered someone who came to pick them up shortly after walking. It was only then that Jingyun found out that he had been out of the capital for 2 months, and when he returned, he would become the Prince of Annam from the 6th Prince, and have a fiancée who was not yet of her hair. "Did Miss Wen wake up?" Someone nodded and said, "I'm awake." Not only did he wake up, but he was also bouncing around and doing nothing. What else did Jingyun not understand? His face turned black like the bottom of a pot, and his guards were even more indignant. The emperor actually agreed to let their master go to celebrate. Their master is a phoenix, dragon, and grandson. In order to win over documents and encourage them, does the royal authority disappear? To return to the 6th prince's mansion, one must pass through the residence of General Wensheng. The servants of the general's mansion were overjoyed, and Jingyun's guards couldn't help but turn their heads and sigh silently. When they saw the newly replaced plaque of the Annam prince's mansion, these guards became even more angry and inexplicably felt glaring. The steward of the royal household respectfully stepped forward and said, "Your Highness, the emperor has an order for you to enter the palace as soon as you return to the capital." Jingyun returned to his Jin courtyard and changed into a new outfit. He coldly ordered, within 3 days, find out which side of the ambush was on the road. The guard commander asked cautiously, "Does the master really agree to marry Miss Wen? What is the purpose of marrying someone who has not yet reached her hairpin?" However, General Wen's military power is indeed enviable. The decree has been issued, and this matter has become a foregone conclusion. Put away everything in the mansion that cannot be seen by outsiders. After speaking, he calmly left and went into the palace. As the sky gradually darkened and the sun set in the west, Wenmian Mian, who had been wandering on the street for a long time, arrived to return to her mansion. While waiting for the bus, she looked at the scene in front of her and let out a deep sigh. "Brother, why don't we pave this road? If it rains, we can't even get a foot of mud on it." Coming out of the tea house, only 2 main streets were paved with bluestone slabs, and the rest were covered in mud. What's even more terrifying is that there are still open channels for sewage discharge. When the sun shines, the scene is really eye-wrenching. When a carriage passed by her, the horse pulling the carriage pouted its butt, and a series of horse manure fell to the ground. The driver seemed to have driven the horse away without seeing it. Wenmian Mian said that once you come to this street, you have no desire to come again. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Is all the sins created by our own deity? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 is all the sins created by our own deity. The wind blew and yellow sand filled the sky. When Ling Xiao let out a few moans, and when Mian Mian felt that there was only feces in the yellow sand. Waiting for the yellow sand to blow by, when Ling Xiao happily said, "It takes a lot of money to lay bluestone slabs, and the national treasury cannot be considered very wealthy. How could it be possible to spend money to lay the road surface?" When Mian Mian sighed again, and now she could almost imagine that when it rained, mud and fecal water would flow horizontally, with sludge everywhere. If the sun shines continuously, it will be dust flying and blocking the sky and sun. It seems that the cleanliness, tidiness, and luxury of the general's mansion have made her look forward to this unfamiliar dynasty too much, and now her heart is shattered. She was deceived by the magnificent ancient street scenes on TV, and the deception was so tragic. "If I have money, I will go and build a new street. I must make sure that the people of Kyoto can experience some prosperity." Listening to her bold words, when Ling Xiao awkwardly touched his nose. It was nothing else, because there was really not much money in the mansion, and who made their whole family not good at taking care of common affairs. It seemed like they were on the verge of making ends meet. Hey, the sunset filled the sky, and the returning birds swiftly glided by, leaving behind a few eager bird songs. Before entering the house, when Ling Xiao handed Wenmian Mian a bag of dim sum. "Listen to my brother and give this bag of dim sum to my mother. Your mother is looking after you these days when you are ill. Don't be petty. Before my mother passed away, she entrusted you to my aunt and asked us siblings to treat her as if she were our biological mother." You also nodded. "In recent years, you and your aunt have not been close, but your aunt has been silently taking care of you. My brother has never said anything, and the mansion has never been prosperous, but all your expenses are the best. Speaking of which, my younger brother is just average." What when Ling Xiao didn't say was that due to his younger sister's domineering and displeasure, his younger brother Weniqing's life was not very good, and he didn't like talking anymore. He was as brave as a quail. When Mian Mian takes over the dim sum chat line and nods. She has been running away from it since she woke up. It is because of the tension between her mother and her own aunt, who is afraid of embarrassment when meeting her. So far, she has not visited her. They are all sins created by our own master. In the study of the general's mansion, the documents that had already returned from the palace were barely looking at the books piled up in front of them, and Mrs. Wen frowned as she spoke about the expenses in the mansion. "General, could you please discuss with the old master to allocate half of the profits from Zhuangzi and Puzi to the public? The cash in the mansion will be deducted from the monthly payment of the next month's servants and various procurement expenses, leaving less than 1,000 taels. During this continuous illness, many families in Kyoto have prepared generous gifts to visit. When this person recovers, they always have to offer 2 tables to show their gratitude." Vice General Luo from the general's camp also begged to come to the mansion yesterday, saying that his mother was seriously ill and wanted to borrow money to make a living. These piles and pieces all need to be supported by silver money. Don't be fooled by the power of this powerful general, Wenmian, who enjoys unlimited fame outside, but inside he earns less and spends more. The general's mansion is often in a state of not being able to make ends meet. The document asked reluctantly, father still refuses to take out the money. Madam Wen nodded helplessly and said, the silver that has been handed over to my father in the past 2 years should add up to at least 100,000 taels. When my father took the silver, he also mentioned that there was an urgent need in the mansion to ask him for it. I can't take it out anymore. Madam Wen was very helpless. Speaking of her father. In law, he was a very lucky person. He was originally the eldest son of a small official's family, but he found a loophole and married a girl from the Liu family. Although the Liu family was not a high-ranking official, they also had 2 governors, and their ancestors even held the rank of Grand Master. In theory, if he had climbed into such a Yu family, he should have hung his head on the beam and stabbed his thigh. However, they entrusted all the affairs of the family to their wives, and they were content to enjoy themselves. They even took in several beautiful concubines, but after hard work, only a concubine named Aunt Hua gave birth to an illegitimate daughter. Fortunately, the wife-in-chief gave birth to a son safely earlier, which prevented him from having no future. Throughout his life, he was mediocre but had a smooth sailing. As his son grew older and became successful, he naturally became the biological father of General Wen Sheng and a dignified old man in the capital city. However, there is a saying that is still wrong. They don't really care about everything, and the money still needs to be managed, especially in recent years. It has become even worse, and I don't know what to do with that money. The most speechless thing is not being able to talk about him yet. As soon as I say it, I burst into tears, and even when I think about it, I feel suffocated. I'll go talk to my father tonight, no matter what. Before she finished speaking, she stopped. Wenmian Mian came in with 2 plates of dim sum. Dad, I went out with my brother today and bought several kinds of dim sum. These 2 are salty. Have a try. After saying that, he saw another person in the study. He was embarrassed. Then he naturally handed the dim sum to Mrs. Wen. Mother, do you want to try it? Madam Wen was momentarily stunned, and instinctively felt that something was wrong with her ears. How could Mian call her mother? I am soft. Mrs. Wen was somewhat incredulous, suppressing her excitement and saying, Mian, what do you call me? Wenmian also felt slightly surprised by the sound of mother. When his first wife passed away due to illness, he begged him to marry his orphan aunt as his stepmother before his death. This was not only to provide support for his mother and son in the future, but also to ensure that his aunt could stay with him wholeheartedly. At that time, Mian was very close to her aunt, but when she found out that her aunt had become a mother, her attitude changed from intimacy to extreme disgust. Time flies for 3 years, and during these 3 years, not to mention calling mother, even aunt has never been called again. Wenmian Mian felt even more embarrassed, thinking that the change in attitude was too big to explain. She then handed the plate forward and said, do you want to eat? Okay. Madam Wen hurriedly picked up a piece of pepper and sesame small salt cake and took a light bite at her mouth. She quickly turned around, pinched her handkerchief and pressed her eye circles, then turned around and smiled, the one you picked is really delicious. If you like it, leave it all for you. Putting down the plate, he turned around and left. Upon closer inspection, the figure behind him had a posture of 2 points fleeing in despair. Waiting to leave the study, I took a slow and soothing breath when suddenly I saw a small figure standing nearby, trembling and taking 2 steps back involuntarily. When Mian sighed again, it was all injustice. Little brother, are you waiting for your mother here? 5-year-old Wen Yiqing stood still with his head down, his little fingers pinching each other anxiously. When Mian went straight up, little brother, my father and mother are still talking in the study. I went out of the house today and bought dim sum. I also have your share. Go and have a taste. Wenyiqing raised his head in disbelief, blinked twice with his big eyes, and before he could speak, he was led by Wenmian Mian. Let's go, let's eat dim sum. On the way, Wenyiqing carefully scrutinized her, imagining in his mind how his sister would torture him when she arrived at Jingyun residence. I can't lift my calves and lead. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The Crying Old Master 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The Crying Old Master 1. As the night fell and the lanterns lit up, the lantern of Jingyun residence had already been lit. Lingua and Lingqiao welcomed Wenmian Mian back with joy, and were also surprised to see her holding Wenyiqing. Through the light, Wenmian could clearly see Wenyiqing's appearance. His face was red and round, his eyes were black and bright, and his eyelashes were thick. He was a cute little boy. Subconsciously, he reached out and gently pinched his plump cheeks, which felt quite good to the touch. Wenyiqing's heart was raised to the throat of the child, standing stiff and afraid to move around, afraid of being beaten. Just as his thoughts were flying, a dish of dim sum was pushed to him. I bought it for you today. Have a try. Wenyiqing shrank her neck, her eyes slightly red, tears swirling in her eyes, and quietly looked at the door to estimate how likely she was to escape. Wenmian Mian silently stroked her forehead. If it's too soft, then she can only come hard and say, hurry up and eat. If you don't eat, I'll beat you up. Oh. Wenyiqing hurriedly grabbed a piece of egg cake and stuffed it into his mouth. He didn't even chew much before swallowing it, and his neck stretched long as he choked. Drinking water, why are you in a hurry? Did you say they won't give you food? Wenmian stared at him and drank water, then handed him a piece of chicken cake. Eat slowly, she said this time, Wenyiqing accepted his fate. Jingyun was surrounded by his sister's people inside and outside, and he couldn't escape. He lowered his head and took a bite of the chicken cake, slowly eating it. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he said, oh, this chicken cake is delicious. After finishing a few bites, I instinctively reached out to grab it. I stole a glance at Wenmian Mian and saw her looking down at the book in her hand. The corners of her lips curled up in an invisible arc, quickly touching a chicken cake and happily taking a bite. After he finished Wenmian Mian happily, he looked up at him and said, aren't you afraid I've poisoned you? Wenyiqing. Is it still possible to spit it out now? Wenmian Mian nodded and smiled, I'm lying to you. I'll have dinner later, be careful if I eat too much and have diarrhea. Seeing his eyes constantly glancing at the chicken cake, Wenmian Mian said, if you like it, come by yourself tomorrow, but you can't eat more than 3 in a day. Wenyiqing carefully looked at Wenmian Mian, feeling that his sister seemed different today, but still made him feel dangerous. I'll go find my mother, he said. After finishing speaking, he ran away in a flash, as if afraid of being detained. Lingua looked at the chicken cake on the table in confusion and said, Miss, did you really not take any medicine? Wenmian Mian glanced at her and said, your girl is beautiful and kind-hearted. How could she do such a thing? The corners of Lingua's mouth twitched slightly. Who locked the young master in a small black room, calling the heavens not the earth not to be clever? A beautiful person with a kind heart, he after dinner, the clerk took a deep breath and went to the Hanyuan in the mansion. This was the courtyard where Mr. and Mrs. Wen lived. At this time, Mrs. Wen was still worshipping Buddha at Yuanan Temple, and only Mr. Wen was in the courtyard. Old Master Wen is already in his 60s, with a thin figure and silver strands covering his hair. He feels a bit disheartened when facing his own son. I came over today to get 50,000 taels of silver from my father. The expenses in the mansion are high, and some of them cannot be supported, said the clerk. Without much communication, I need money. Grandpa Wen shrunk his neck and said, I see this mansion is pretty good, and it doesn't seem like I can't afford it. I've been feeling a bit short of breath lately, and when I saw the doctor, he said I want to take a ginseng root to supplement it. The ginseng is quite expensive, and I can't afford to spend so much money for a while. The document took a deep breath and said, in recent years, you have moved 100,000 taels of silver and eaten ginseng. Grandpa Wen shook his head repeatedly, and the document reluctantly asked, your food, clothing, and expenses are all prepared for you in the mansion, and theoretically there is nothing you need to spend money on, so you have raised someone outside. Faced with his son's questioning, Mr. Wen, who lowered his head, looked up with tears in his eyes and said, don't you also look down on me? I'm your father. What I'm talking about is silver. Don't talk about it. Your granddaughter is recovering from a serious illness and needs good medicine to take care of her. The mansion is not well off now. Just say how much silver you can still take out. For this father, the document really feels tired. No wonder his mother would rather stay in the temple to worship Buddha than come back to see him. A terrible old man in his 60s, who can't help but wipe his tears, just like a girl. In the end, Mr. Wen didn't bring out anything, and without a thesis or book, he couldn't say he didn't have money. He was so angry that he felt heartbroken about the documents. When Ling Xiao returned to the yard and looked at the 9-story ghost craft ball placed in the box, pondering and finally deciding not to take the risk. So when the second prince learned that when Ling Xiao was no longer using the ghost ball, he immediately threw the teacup at the strategist and said, is this your chance of winning? He is ready to speak up after seeing the documents, but what is the result? The strategist didn't care about the tea splashing on his clothes, so he took a step forward and said, this is really unexpected. However, taking the gift from the emperor is a serious crime, and it's only natural for Lord Wen to not take risks. A major event occurred in General Wen's mansion, and I'm not even aware of it in the documents, which is much more serious than the charge of privately buying and selling imperial gifts. The second prince looked up and said, speaking of it. The strategist approached and whispered a few words in front of the second prince. The second prince's eyes lit up and he said, has this matter been investigated? The strategist took 2 steps back and said, it's already 8 or 9, and I have sent someone to carefully search for evidence. The second prince stood up with an excited light in his eyes, hurry up, you must get the evidence before the boss and the others. At the same time, in the Annan prince's mansion, which is separated from General Wenqing's mansion by a wall, Hua Jingyun, dressed in a crescent white embroidered green bamboo robe, listened to the people below in the study of Jingyun reporting important matters. Since Miss Wen woke up, Prince Anbei has remained stable. The second prince to the 5th prince have all made moves. The people who ambushed us in the suburbs of Beijing this time are the second prince, the 3rd prince, and the 4th prince's men. In Kyoto, they are not idle either, they are all thinking about how to bribe General Wen. General Wen's mansion was in financial difficulties, and Prince Wen wanted to sell the items bestowed by the emperor. The second prince and several others were aware of this news. Qi Hui, a strategist under the second prince's command, personally negotiated with Prince Wen's people, but for some reason, Prince Wen changed his mind and stopped selling. The news I just heard is that General Wen's father, Mr. Wen, may have been caught with some leverage. Hua Jingyun's soared eyebrows furrowed lightly, his slender eyelashes with a pair of starry eyes as deep as the moon. He didn't like to stand out in anything, nor did he like trouble. Unexpectedly, after returning to Beijing this time, trouble came one after another. I sighed helplessly at the thought that there would be an extra person in the mansion soon. Go and find out what the handle is, don't let others get the hang of it first. Now he has been tied up with the documents, and if something happens to the Wen family, he will be even more troublesome. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Sister, put me in a small black room. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Sister, put me in a small black room in the small study of Kaiyunju. 2 Rui Pavilion palace lamps are lit. The exquisite palace lamps emit a sparkling light that illuminates the desk. Dipped in ink, the tip of the wolf hair pen was copying stroke by stroke on the beige rice paper. The pen was written with a lingering and focused expression, half hanging down in front of the eyes. It was only when a piece of rice paper was fully written that the pen was put away, and the handwriting on the rice paper looked at with a faint sigh. Memory can be lost, spleen can have slight changes, and what is learned and known can vary, but this writing alone cannot explain it. In order to adapt to this familiar and unfamiliar place, she spends her free time searching for books in the study during the day and secretly practicing calligraphy at night. In order to imitate the handwriting of my master realistically or even deliberately, fortunately, although I am not ignorant or inexperienced, I am not much better. As long as I give her half a month, she can definitely practice it. Fortunately, I am proud and indulgent, without the elegant hobbies of playing music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Otherwise, she would really be unable to explain. Rubbing the sore wrist, my mind was still digesting what Wen Lingxiao had revealed. Her cheap general father has immense power, but he comes from a grassroots background, and this Wenqing general's mansion can be said to have no foundation at all. Of course, her understanding of the essence lies in money, but unfortunately, there is a poor amount of information about the property in the mansion in her memory, and some scattered information is quite good. Although she didn't know how to fight, she also knew that there were not many wealthy people who became generals. If Wen Lingxiao could say the words "the mansion is not prosperous," she was afraid that she had already reached the point of being stretched thin. Hey, she is ready to live a life of wealth and boundless blessings. Dreams shatter too quickly. The rapid passage of time, these repeated strokes may be dull and uninteresting, but they have a strange power that makes people unconsciously calm down and become more calm. Take it as it comes. At dawn, the two maids, Lingqiao and Lingua, gently pushed open the door and walked in one by one. One person put away the hot water they had brought, and the other went to the bed to wake them up. Wenmian Mian, who only fell asleep in the early hours of the morning, pulled the blanket over her head, flipped over and turned her back towards Lingua, making it clear that she didn't want to get up. Lingua reached out to pull the blanket and said, "Miss, get up quickly. The sun is rising high outside, and the second young master is here again. He's still wandering outside the door. Should we call him in first?" When Mian opened her eyes, rolled over, and sat up. "Hurry up and dress me up, I have to catch him today. Do we have any dim sum? That boy Weniching ran here for 2 consecutive days, but he didn't come in. When he saw her shadow, he ran as fast as a rabbit seeing an eagle. When I catch him, you guys close the door and see where he's running." Lingua dressed her skillfully, and said with a light smile, "There are no dim sum bought outside the house. It's not easy to put them away. Only the dim sum made by the cook in the house. It's a pity that the dim sum made by the cook is really not satisfactory, and the second young master doesn't like it very much." Then Chaoan smiled, "I heard that the cook in the next Nan mansion paid a lot of money, and the dim sum was not only exquisite but also delicious." When Mian smiled and said, "So clear, have you ever tasted it?" Lingua shriveled and said, "We are close to each other. You don't know that the concierge in our house listens to the concierge next door show off every day, saying that dim sum is more beautiful and delicious. What's more, it adds meat and vegetables, gets a reward, makes clothes and so on. The jealous eyes are red." The gatekeeper Wei Saner also said he wanted to find an opportunity to put a sack on the neighboring gatekeeper and beat them up so that they could show off. After speaking, she quickly covered her mouth, as if she had said too much. The girl had always thought that the mansion was very wealthy. When Mian handed her the handkerchief to wipe her face and smiled, "That's the difference between having money and not having money. If she eats bran and swallows vegetables all day, the next door will be full of fish and meat, and she envies them, wishing to beat them up." Lingua was taken aback for a moment and said, "Miss, do you already know? It's not a shame that the mansion is not rich for the time being." When Mian patted her on the shoulder. "In the future, he will also hire a delicate cook who is dedicated to cooking, and he can see some meat every day." Lingua smiled with curved eyebrows and eyes, waiting for the girl to marry into the next door. She said a comforting word, the general and the lady both said that we can't shorten the Kaiyun residence. The girl doesn't need to worry. Wenmian chuckled twice, feeling inexplicably guilty. The outside is already sunny, and the flowers in the yard are blooming well, emitting a faint fragrance. Wenmian Mian walked lightly to the door, poked her head out and carefully glanced at the child. When she saw Wenyiqing anxiously rubbing her little hands and looking conflicted, she immediately smiled. When he approached the door a little closer, he seized the opportunity and immediately pulled the person into the yard, saying, "Lingua, close the door." "Did I catch you?" As the door slowly closed, the fierce sister crossed her waist and showed a malicious smile. The child, Wenyiqing, was frightened and tears welled up in her eyes. "Hold back your tears, if you dare to cry, I will lock you up in a small black room." Wenyiqing took a deep breath, rolled his eyes and blinked, holding back the tears that were about to flow, and stood pitifully. Waiting to be pulled into the room again, I saw the meat patties and buns on the table and silently swallowed my saliva, forcibly shifting my gaze away. At this moment, Wenmian Mian began to have breakfast. Although breakfast was not particularly sumptuous, it was still quite exquisite. She picked up a piece of meat cake and took a bite, with thin skin and thick filling. The meat aroma mixed with the onion aroma immediately dissipated, making Wenyiqing even more envious. "Tell me, why wander outside the door? I want to have dim sum." Wenmian smiled when he saw that he wanted to eat and was very tough. "Dim sum is gone, and they all said that they would like to eat it by themselves. Do you expect me to keep it for you if you don't come?" Then he shook a half piece of meat pie at the tip of his nose. "No dim sum, do you want meat pie?" The corners of Lingua's mouth twitched slightly, feeling that their girl was getting worse and worse. Seeing that Wenyiqing was still holding on, Wenmian Mian shook her head regretfully and said, "This meat cake is really fragrant. If you don't eat it, it's fine." Wenyiqing felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart, and a tear fell from his eyes. He was immediately frightened, thinking that he would be locked up in a dark room. With a horizontal heart, he sat down and picked up some spare chopsticks on the table to pick up meat patties. Eating it in your mouth and then being locked up in a small dark room can be considered a profit. Wow, the meat patties are delicious. Aziabazi is filled with meat, eat it well. Oh, and the red bean paste buns are also delicious. Waiting for him to sweep away the table like a whirlwind, he put down his chopsticks and let out a satisfied hiccup. "All right, sister, please lock me up in the dark room." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Bull blows too big. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Bull blows too big. According to the rules of the general's mansion, breakfast and lunch are served in one's own yard, and only at night do the family have dinner together. Wenyiqing, who had breakfast at Kaiyunju, didn't leave. For one thing, he was waiting to be locked up in a small black room. Secondly, I still thought about having lunch here, thinking that if I had to use lunch before being locked up in a dark room, I would really make a lot of money. During lunchtime, when Wenmian Mian saw him sweeping the dishes again and asked with concern, "You have already eaten 2 bowls of rice. Can your stomach still hold it?" "Hiccup, I can eat it." Wenyi didn't lift his head, but the food at Kaiyunju was too delicious. He wanted to eat another bowl. Wenmian Mian rolled her eyes and said, "If you stop at the right time, I'll allow you to come to my place for dinner in the future. Otherwise, you'll have to close the small black room now." "Really?" Wenyiqing put down his chopsticks directly, but in fact, he couldn't eat any more. "Just give it a try and you'll know if it's really fake." Wenmian Mian put down her chopsticks and wiped her mouth. She stood up and walked towards the yard. "Follow me. This stinky guy has no control over his food. What if he breaks it?" Wenyiqing, who was walking behind her, carefully scrutinized her. When she couldn't see her, the corners of her mouth lit up with joy. Sister had been fierce these days, but the light in her eyes didn't dislike him anymore. "If only my sister had been like this all the time," he said, allowing him to have 2 meals here without disliking his appearance. I didn't know what I was saying in my heart, but I blurted it out and quickly covered my mouth. Wenmian Mian turned his head and said, "It depends on your performance. If you behave well, I will invite you to eat dim sum, a delicious dim sum." "How delicious is it?" Wenmian Mian couldn't describe it. "Anyway, it's just delicious. It's a big deal to buy more dim sum. There are always delicious ones." Wen Yiqing tilts his head and asks expectantly, "Is it the dim sum of the next palace? I heard that the dim sum of the next house is the best dim sum." Wenmian Mian smiled awkwardly. She couldn't guarantee it. In the eyes of Wen Yiqing, her hesitation was not as good as the dim sum next door. Suddenly, she looked disappointed and said quietly, "If only I could eat the dim sum next door." Wen Yiqing was originally cute. Seeing his disappointed face for just a little dim sum, Wenmian Mian fainted and immediately promised, "It's the dim sum next door. I'll arrange it for you as soon as possible." "Is it really true?" said Wen Yiqing with a surprised expression on her face. "Really, this cow is being hyped up. How can she get it? Is today okay?" "The day after tomorrow." The child, Wen Yiqing, was disappointed and pinched his finger, feeling disheartened. Wenmian Mian rolled his eyes and said, "Our mansion is not at the point where we can't afford to eat. It seems like you have reached the point where there are no last meals. Also, don't you have to go to school? She's already 5 years old and spends her days wandering around the mansion." Suddenly, she blinked and said, "Oh, she's also going to school now. But is she sick? She can continue to rest for a few more days." When she asked, Wen Yiqing's eyes turned red again and he anxiously lowered his head to compete with his fingers. Lingua couldn't help but come forward and remind, "Second young master hasn't gone to school now. Madam is worried about this matter." Then he quietly explained to Wenmian Mian, because Wen Yiqing was timid and didn't like to talk. The children in the school also knew that he was not the biological son of General Wen and that he didn't live well in the mansion, so they all bullied him. After being bullied several times in a row, I cried all day and had no choice but to leave. Not promising. Wenmian Mian closed her eyes and then opened them to scan her head. She saw a faint red light on his head, thinking that he was going to have good luck. Well, encountering her is not just a stroke of luck. Seeing his pitiful expression, I couldn't help but want to lecture him a few words. "Your father is a great general. How many families in this capital city can offend him? How could you be bullied to the point where you dare not go to school? Do you think it's appropriate for me to bully you in the mansion and be bullied by others when you go out?" Wen Yi lifted his head with a clear expression. Wenmian Mian stepped forward and pinched his face with one hand, crossed his waist with the other, and said arrogantly, "I'm not promising. I bullied you because I'm your sister. As a younger brother, why did you bully your sister? After leaving the door, you are the second son of General Wenqing's mansion, representing the face of General Wenqing's mansion. Whoever dares to bully you, you must bully them hard and go back. With your father and elder brother supporting you, besides the prince, who else in this capital do you dare not beat?" Wen Yiqing heard such remarks for the first time, and his face was pinched with pain, his eyes wide open. You should know that his mother always told him to be obedient, sensible, obedient, and to give way to his sister. If he goes out and gets bullied, just endure it and don't cause trouble for his father. No one has ever told him to support him, he doesn't have to be bullied. Seeing him crying again, Wenmian Mian relaxed her hand and rubbed his round face. "A man, why cry so easily? Hold back your tears," she said. "In the future, you must remember to show respect to your sister at home, abide by rules and regulations, and remember all kinds of delicious, fun, and good things. When you leave, you must be arrogant, bold, walk with your head and chest high, and walk out of 6. Forget it, just remember, my sister will cover you up in the future." Wen Yiqing blinked and looked up to see a smile in his sister's eyes. She didn't dislike him, and her mouth curled up, feeling extremely aggrieved. "Wow!" Suddenly, he threw himself into Wenmian Mian's arms and burst into tears, the sound of which sounded strange and heartbreaking. Standing outside the gate of Jingyun residence were Wenmian and Lady Wen, who were worried that Wenyiqing would be bullied by Wenmian again, so they came to see the situation. After listening to the words coming out of the yard, the clerk reluctantly turned her head to look at Mrs. Wen, who was lowering her head and pressing her eyes. "The children get along quite well," he said. Madame Wen nodded, as if she had 1,000 words to say for a moment, all of which eventually turned into a joyful smile. "Don't cry anymore, go back and bring your book over to read to me." When the sound came out of the yard again, the clerk reluctantly dragged Mrs. Wen away. It was inconvenient for adults to interfere too much with the children's affairs. After a while, the courtyard of Jingyun heard the sound of Wenyiqing reading books. Wenmian lay on a rocking chair, closed her eyes and basking in the sun, feeling happy in her heart. Being able to train this kid again and let her learn openly is like killing 2 birds with 1 stone, not to mention being a good sister today, beautiful. The warm sun shines high, the fragrance of flowers bursts, and the clear sound of reading haunts my ears. After enjoying the moment, Wenmian Mian sighs with her eyes closed. The cow blows so much. How can she get dim sum from the next room? I really worry about people. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Dim sum next door. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Dim sum next door, are you sure it's here? As night fell, in the desolate courtyard at the southwest corner of General Wenxing's mansion, Wenmian Mian stood under the wall, looking up for a breakthrough. Lingguo looked at the ladder at his feet and said, "Girl, let's go back. It would be great if we were caught." Wenmian Mian walked along the wall once, feeling uneasy. Seeing that Lingguo wanted to escape, she smiled and said, "Don't worry, I just want to take a look." "The news you've heard is not bad, is it?" Seeing her shining eyes, Lingguo expressed her disbelief. "Girl, you don't have to eat the dim sum next door. We still have money in hand. Tomorrow, just go out and buy more. The girl and her family is going crazy. She is going to climb over the wall to get dim sum from the next one. That's the royal residence." The king of Annam next door was already forced to have a crush on her family girl. How could he be so happy in his heart? If the girl was discovered and then shouted out, his reputation would be ruined. By this time, the sky had completely darkened, and a star could not be seen in the dark sky overhead. The so called dark moon and high wind at night, when dim sum arrived, she blew the cow to the sky. If dim sum could not be obtained, her great image would not collapse in my heart. Where is the future majesty? Take the ladder and put it on the rack. I'll go there and have a look. I'll follow a dim sum, but I won't take more. No, girl, why don't you think about it again? Wenmian Mian put her hands on her hips. If you want to go on talking like this, dim sum should be removed. My arms couldn't twist my thighs, and Lingguo obediently lifted the ladder that came along. Wenmian Mian didn't hesitate, "Hold on, I'll just go over, you pick me up here." After speaking, she directly supported the ladder up, and when she sat on the wall, flipped over the ladder and went down. Not to mention the wealth of others' palace, I just went out and soon saw an ambulatory of carved beams and painted rafters, on which the bright light from the lanterns was shining around. She adjusted her breathing and walked into the corridor with her head down. She saw patrolling guards passing by in front of her, took a deep breath, and walked over with a smile. "Big brothers, the kitchen steward ordered me to withdraw dim sum from the main courtyard. I'm new here and I don't know the way. Can you give me some directions?" Who can doubt a person who takes the initiative to ask a little girl? The patrolling person saw her sweet smile and happily pointed her in the direction. Wenmian Mian smiled and thanked her, "Thank you, big brother." "What's your surname, big brother?" "My name is Zhang Quan." "See you, brother Zhang." Wenmian Mian walked away with a proud expression on her face. Zhang Quan looked at her back with a sigh on his face and said, at last, we have a beautiful girl from our royal mansion. It's really not easy. The prince has a cold and aloof personality, and all the officials in the mansion are public unless necessary. It's too difficult. The guards behind him also stretched their necks and worked hard to look at it. It looked really nice. Following Zhang Quan's instructions, Wenmian Mian smoothly came to the outside of the Jingyun. When he arrived here, he dared not enter at will. He looked around and saw a man. He hurried forward. "Brother, I am the kitchen manager who ordered me to withdraw dim sum." The visitor glanced at her without much suspicion and said, "Go in and get it." Wenmian Mian suppressed her joy and said, "I dare not enter the prince's yard casually. Please show me a way." The person felt even more at ease. "New here. What's your name?" "Big brother, I'm Xiaocui. This is the first time I've returned to the prince's yard." The person walking ahead turned around and glanced at her, thinking that the girl was really clever and had a sweet mouth. "My name is Qin Feng, and you can come find me from now on," he said. "Got it, brother Qin Feng." The breeze was elated by the words, "Big brother," on the left and "Big brother," on the right, and walked briskly with Wenmian Mian into the living room of the Jingyun and got the dim sum plate. Seeing that the dim sum in the dish did not move at all, Wenmian asked with a smile, "The prince is not here today." Qin Feng smiled and said, "The prince is busy, take it away." Wenmian Mian, who was warmly sent to the door by Qin Feng, held up a dim sum plate. "Brother Qin Feng, do you want one?" The dim sum in the dish is peach blossom cake, which is just like the blooming peach blossom. It is very exquisite. The fresh breeze happily pinches it together. "Thank you, Miss Xiaocui." According to the rules of the mansion, the kitchen will send new dim sum in the morning every day, and pick them up in the evening, which is basically eaten by servants. After all, the dim sum of the overnight cannot continue to be sent to the lord. Leaving Jingyun, Wenmian was so excited that she almost burst out laughing, which was too smooth. When she got down from the ladder again, Lingua hurriedly took the person down. Seeing the dim sum she was carrying, she quickly covered her mouth. This heart was really smoothed back. Returning to Jingyun with a proud smile, he said, "Lingua, you are very capable in handling things. All the information you have heard is correct. According to your information, I got this dim sum very smoothly and honestly." Lingua felt that his heart had finally returned, and his eyes fell on the plate of exquisite dim sum, exclaiming, "My God, this is really dim sum. How can it be so beautiful?" Wenmian patted her hands and squeezed a piece, taking a big bite. "Oh, it's sweet and has a peach blossom flavor, delicious. Try one too, and hide the rest." Lingua rubbed his hands and wiped his clothes hard twice. He carefully picked up a peach blossom cake and sniffed it at the tip of his nose, his face full of intoxication. Before taking a small bite. Seeing this article, she sighed endlessly. She was still too poor, and now she could understand the pain of the gatekeeper. It was just a wall, and the gap was too big. There is actually a wall separating these two prefectures, which is quite convenient. Lingua swallowed the dim sum in his mouth and smiled. "Miss, you forget that our house and the next king's house were originally the same residence, the residence of the former imperial duke of the former imperial court. The former imperial duke of the former imperial court was powerful, and the corrupt silver was more than the tax silver of the national treasury in a year. After the emperor ascended the throne, he moved down the Duke of Fugua and divided this mansion in half, giving it to the general and the sixth prince." Wenmian Mian suddenly realized, and she said that this mansion was beautiful everywhere, and it didn't look like it was struggling at all. It turned out to be built by a former wealthy and corrupt official. Seeing her willing expression, she urged, "Take a big bite and I'll go get it another day. After all, she already has a network next door, so it's not difficult to go again." Lingua forgot the danger when he had dim sum, and ate happily. The next morning, when the child Wenyiqing appeared again in Jingyun with his book, he widened his eyes as he looked at a peach blossom cake in front of him. He didn't ask where it came from, just ate it and squinted his happy eyes. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Power from Dim Sum. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Power from Dim Sum. Sister, this is the most delicious dim sum I have ever had. Wenmian exclaimed. If he hadn't remembered the rules in his mind, he would have liked to repeat his fingers carefully. I've never eaten such delicious dim sum before. Did my sister buy them? Of course. Wenmian Mian lied without making a draft. The dim sum is better than the dim sum next door. It is said that the dim sum is made by the dim sum chef next door. It's very old. Really? It must be true. Wenmian Mian patted her chest. Can I lie to you? Have you ever eaten something better than this before? Wenmian shook his head. I think it must be better than the dim sum next door. The master must be better than the apprentice. Lingua's face turned red with a suppressed smile, and her girl was really getting better at talking nonsense. Wenmian Mian listened to his voice a lot louder and promised benefits. You are obedient and will go back to school tomorrow. No one should be afraid. As long as you are not bullied, I will buy you such delicious dim sum, which may be even more delicious than this. Wenmian is a little confused, thinking that his sister has kept her promise to buy him such delicious dim sum. She will certainly cover him and support him in the future. Besides, he wants to eat more delicious dim sum. After realizing this, he nodded heavily and said, I'll listen to my sister. If anyone dares to bully me again, I'll beat him up. Sister, rest assured that I will definitely not be bullied in the future. Wenmian Mian silently gave herself a thumbs-up sign. It was worth her effort to get dim sum back. Unexpectedly, this dim sum was so powerful. After a moment, Kaiyunju heard the sound of reading books. In the sun and on the rocking chair, Wenmian Mian, who is lying down and enjoying herself, bubbles in her heart. At this time, she would never think that dim sum is much more powerful than she imagined. At this moment, the official documents being processed by the military headquarters inexplicably sneezed twice in a row, feeling like something was about to happen. In the afternoon, Wenmian went to the main courtyard and found her mother, who said she wanted to return to school, which surprised Mrs. Wen severely. When she realized that it was all thanks to Wenmian Mian, her eyes turned red with excitement. Good child, mother, I'll tidy up now. I'll go back to school early tomorrow morning, won't I? Wenmian looked up with a smile and said, I'll go early tomorrow morning. I promised my sister. Wenmian thought that he could eat the most delicious dim sum after performing well. He turned happily and ran away. I went to find my sister. As she watched his cheerful back, Lady Wen wept with joy and turned to suppress her eyes. Lu Mama, who was serving her closely, said, I've seen a really different experience with the girl being sick. Her temperament has improved a lot compared to before. The young master has a timid and delicate temperament. If the girl were willing to pull him out, he would definitely be much better off. After all, in the eyes of these people, the timidity and humility of the second young master is largely due to the girl's displeasure. Madame Wen nodded with a smile and said, Mammy, where did I put my red gold and pearl necklace? In 2 days, the Prince of Annam will bring the people from the Ministry of Rights to be hired. Mian Mian also needs to dress up well. After hesitating for a moment, Lu Mama turned around to find her and sighed faintly as she looked at the luxurious collar in the box. This was lady's dowry back then, she said. Madame Wen picked up the collar and carefully looked at it, with a smile on her lips. I don't have a daughter, my sister's daughter is my own daughter, and I originally wanted to leave it for Mian Mian, she said. Put the collar into the box and say, it's a bit old. You can send it to wipe and refurbish it. That night, the breeze from the next brocade yard wandered at the door intentionally or unintentionally. The talent who came to withdraw dim sum after a long time in the big kitchen came late. He saw another familiar face. The breeze's nose was not his nose, and the eyes were not his eyes, so he withdrew dim sum. I originally wanted to ask Miss Xiaotsue, but after thinking about it, I forgot. It was only after a while that a girl finally arrived in the mansion. Don't be frightened. Wenmian Mian, who is being remembered, has already gone on a date with Duke Zhou, sleeping in the warm blanket. I don't know what day it will be tonight. The next morning, birds chirped on the branches outside the window, and the people on the bed slept happily under covers. Girl, it's time to get up. Lingua came over and saw the person on the bed turning their back to her, persuading, Miss, the Prince of Annam and the officials from the Ministry of Personnel will officially come to the mansion to be hired the day after tomorrow. The clothes that Madam has prepared for you will also be put on for a test today, and you should come over soon. Wenmian Mian opened her eyes and yawned expressionlessly. She sat up and said softly, with just my small body, I can't wear fancy clothes or beautiful jewelry. Why bother doing so much? It's a waste of material. She hasn't even reached her hairpin yet. In an instant, the sound of lifting the curtain came. Madam Wen arrived with a new garment on her needle and thread. Seeing that Wenmian Mian was drowsy, she walked forward with a smile and said, Mian Mian is in the prime of her youth. Although she hasn't reached the age of her hair, she is still as young as a green onion. Naturally, she needs to dress better. Hurry up and wash up, try on your clothes. Wenmian Mian stretched out her arms with a coquettish expression. Madam Wen was slightly stunned and sat down on the edge of the bed with a smile. Before she could speak, the person on the bed pounced into her arms and spoke softly, Mother, hug. Madam Wen blinked and recalled when her sister was still alive, Mian Mian would also throw herself into her arms with coquettishness. She said softly, Auntie, hold me. My eyes were hot, and my nose was slightly sore. I gently stroked my back, and a hint of joy spread from the corner of my mouth to my eyebrows and eyes. We're all going to get married now, and you still like to act spoiled so much. The warm embrace was both comfortable and safe, and Wenmian Mian lifted her head with a smile. As long as my mother is still alive, at the age of 80, I am also her little cotton jacket. Does my mother feel that the cotton jacket is very warm now? Madam Wen smiled happily and nodded with a hint of concern, it's too warm, it's still a bit hot. The mother and daughter looked at each other and laughed with joy. Lu Mama outside the door couldn't help but curl her lips when she heard the laughter. The girl was really different. Throughout the morning, the laughter of Kaiyunju never stopped. After trying on clothes and jewelry, Mrs. Wen finally had lunch at Kaiyunju for the first time. Xiao Yi went to school early in the morning, and this was the first time he had been so enthusiastic about going to school. When Mian Mian thought of her dim sum. Yesterday, she promised that she would be rewarded if she performed well today. I don't know whether the peach blossom paste left behind is bad or not. Mrs. Wen continued, I discussed with your father yesterday and decided not to go to the college for the time being. Let's wait until we move next door. Although I am young, I still need to prepare for marriage. It is not appropriate to go to school every day at this time. Regarding this, Wenmian Mian has no opinion and is new to listening to commands. End of this chapter.